Are you paying too much in property taxes? Getting your property's assessed value to accurately reflect market conditions is crucial to ensure you are not overpaying. You can appeal your current tax assessment on your own. Understanding the assessment process is the first step to getting your tax bill reduced. Cincinnati attorney Christopher Finney, along with the Finney Law Firm's property tax valuation team, has deep experience successfully applying their property tax valuation process to reduce property taxes for residential and commercial property owners throughout Ohio and Kentucky. In this video, Mr. Finney walks you through the action steps and legal paperwork you will need to complete to perform this process yourself. If you have multiple properties, investment property, or more complex property tax issues or questions, please contact the Finney Law Firm.
The purpose of the course this evening is to talk about property tax valuation reduction. How can you make sure that, what I call write your portfolio, if you have just your house or if you have multiple properties, the question is how can you make sure you're paying the correct amount of taxes, not overpaying. And what we're going to cover tonight is that Ohio, all 88 counties, the law is the same, has a process. First, that the county auditor sets your valuation. In Southwest Ohio this year, calendar year 2015, if you live in Hamilton County, Claremont County, or Butler County, you should have gotten a new valuation on your house. Warren counties will be next year, and that valuation is determined by the county auditor. That's his statutory right, his statutory responsibility. The point of the course is to teach you about making sure your property valuation is in line with market, and if it's not, there is a process by Ohio law where you can fix that. So as I said, the Hamilton County or the county auditor in your county sets the valuation, and that's a 3-year cycle. So every 3 years, the auditor goes in and updates those values. And his charge is to value property at fair market value, what it's worth. And people look at me and say, well, what's my property worth? I have no idea. We're going to tell you how to establish what your property's worth, find out what your property's worth. But for purposes of this process that we're going to talk about tonight, what your property is worth is what a buyer would pay for it. The same number that you want to know what would somebody pay for my house is what the county auditor should value it at. Now, when Aaron was doing the introduction, he was talking about 3 different values. He said the county auditor's value will be the lowest, what it would sell for would be next, and then maybe a bank appraisal might be higher depending on the circumstances. Well, the reality is that if that's true, if the county auditor's value is the lowest of those 3, you don't want to proceed with what we're going to talk about today of getting your valuation lowered. In other words, this process I'm going to talk about tonight is not about pulling the wool over the eyes of the Board of Revision and convincing them that something that's not true is true. The point of this process is to make sure that you're not overpaying your taxes. If your property is valued correctly, we generally recommend not proceeding with the valuation process that we're talking about. So there's yours truly on slide number 2. And I want to tell you a little bit about our law firm. Our law firm is in Eastgate, but we cover really all of Ohio, and I'm licensed in Kentucky as well. We do business formation and development. Real estate is sort of the core of what we do, real estate and real estate title. We run a title insurance company as well called Ivy Point Title. We have estate planning and probate administration attorneys that handle the entire process of planning your estate and handling that after death. Commercial dispute resolution, which is litigation of all kinds. We also do public interest law. You all may have read about us in the paper from time to time. We have some very high profile public interest lawsuits, and it's a great joy. And actually in your packets tonight, which I'll cover, is a card that talks about our trip to the U.S. Supreme Court last year, which was really an adventure. And we had a case up there and we won 9-0 on a public interest case, an opinion authored by Justice Clarence Thomas. So it was pretty fun to do that. We do labor and employment law, criminal defense, and bankruptcy as well. So pretty much all the needs that an individual or small business would have, we can handle. By the way, what we're going to teach you tonight is how you can do this yourself. You don't have to hire us. This course is comprehensive enough for you here tonight as well as online that you can proceed and do a property tax valuation challenge on your own. That's our objective. but we offer that service as well. And we've had great success, by the way. It's a wonderful practice area. Typically, we bring the client significantly more value than anything we charge, so we have a lot of happy clients in that area. This first slide is sort of the basis for the call. In January of each year, when people get their new tax bills, they call and they say, my gosh, my taxes are so high, what can I do about it? And so that slide sort of brought that idea home. The next series of slides is kind of funny, which is that different people see your property as having different valuation. Of course, that is a part of the point of this course. If the county auditor sees your property as having more value than you do, it's possible to get that valuation reduced. So the first slide shows a nice little cottage and what you think your house looks like. And then the second slide is what the buyer thinks it looks like, which is a shack. The buyer says, he wants to pay you less than he thinks it's worth. And then Aaron comes along, the lender, and he says, my gosh, it's a lousy shack. And the appraiser comes along and he says the place is dilapidated and is falling apart. And then finally the county auditor comes along and he says, no, it looks like Neverland and it's worth millions of dollars. So it's all in the eye of the beholder. By the way, the other purpose of the course that we're going to do tonight is, in the end, we're going to talk about how to get your values low. But one of the things I like to do in this class is to actually teach people about their tax bill, to help you to have a deep understanding of how your taxes are calculated, because there's so much misunderstanding of that. And also, once you have that information, you're then empowered to understand your bill and affect it. Now, your property tax bill ultimately consists of three major calculations to get there. It's the tax valuation, what the auditor says your property's worth, times your tax rate, and then there's some additional adjustments to that. That's essentially how your tax bill is calculated. And this first couple slides talks about the rate. Now, the thing that's important to note is I said it's valuation times rate, right? And that means, and valuation theoretically is going to increase with inflation over time. Now, if valuation is increasing with inflation over time, and the rate is going up as well, what's happening with your taxes? You're actually getting an exponential or a double multiplier of your increase because your valuation's going up, and if that rate's going up over time, it's not your imagination. Your taxes are increasing at significantly beyond the rate of inflation. And the point of the first couple of these slides is to show that to you graphically, okay? So when my wife and I bought our first house around this time frame, the early 1980s, the tax rate in Hamilton County, Cincinnati Public Schools, City of Cincinnati, was around 45 to 50 mills. Now, by the way, again, I'm going to tell you that what you're going to hear tonight is a lot of confusion, a lot of terms that are confusing to you, and you're going to say, why is that? Well, the reason I think it's intentional. The people who wrote the law don't want you to understand your taxes, because if you don't understand your taxes, you're not going to appeal and be involved in that process. On the other hand, if you have a deep understanding of your taxes, you're more likely to get involved and have an impact in that. So the first thing I want to talk about is, what is a mill? Normally people talk in terms of percentages, but in tax world we talk in terms of mills. Mills is dollars per thousand. But it's far more complicated than that, because it's dollars per thousand. But when we talk about property tax valuation, they then multiply times 0.35. Not a third, not 30%, times 0.35. Why would they do that? They do it to confuse you, right? They don't want you to understand your own tax bill. So they start with your actual valuation, they multiply it times 0.35, then they multiply that times your effective tax rate, which is this 45 mil number, and that is essentially, after some adjustments, your tax bill. Now, the reason for this slide is that when I bought my first house, that tax rate was between 45 and 50 mils. Today, that effective tax rate in the city of Cincinnati, Cincinnati Public Schools, which, by the way, Ann, is about the same out in the Forest Hills School District, about the same rate, is close to 75 to 80 mils. the exact same house, the exact same location, you're paying significantly more per thousand, and of course in that same period of time, the valuation has gone up as well. Now this next slide then says, well, if that's true for the last 20 years, what does it look like for the next 10 or 15 years? And what this tells us is, and so understand my oldest son is buying a house right now, and he's now going to pay that 75 to 80 mil rate. But by the time he has children and they buy a house, that rate is going to be closer to 100 mils. So my grandchildren will pay a tax rate, dollars per thousand, effectively double what I did when I bought my first house. And this same trend will continue year after year after year. So then the next question we ask is, how does that rate compare to the surrounding area? So we compare an urban county, which is Hamilton County, to Butler, Claremont, and Warren in this area. And the two bars there are residential rates and then commercial rates. And you'll see Hamilton County has the highest residential rate at 76.5 mils, compared all the way on the left-hand side, well, to Butler County at 56.6 and Claremont County at 57.4. And then the commercial rates are similarly high, 88 mils for Hamilton County, 63 mils for Butler County. For some reason, Claremont County's commercial rate is high. Now let me complete that picture a little bit for you for this area. If you own a house in Southwest Ohio, your taxes are essentially, I'm going to convert mills and all those other calculations into a percentage for you. The effective rate you're going to pay for property taxes is between 2 and 2.5% per year of your property value. So if you have a $100,000 home, you're going to pay about $2,500 per year in taxes. If you have a $200,000 home, it'll be about $5,000 per year, and so on. If you have a house in Kentucky, that same house is only about 1 to 1.1% of taxes, and the same with Indiana. Just to give you an idea, we pay a much, much higher percentage in property taxes in Southwest Ohio than they do right across the river or right across the border in Indiana. And in Hamilton County, your rate is higher than the rural counties. Then we ask the next question, which is, how does Hamilton County compare to other urban counties in Ohio? And the good news is, Cincinnati, Hamilton County used to be the highest in the state. Just 10 years ago, we had the highest tax rate in the state, and we've gotten that under control. And now you'll see that we're right in the middle of the pack maybe. Franklin County is less, and Lucas County is slightly more, and everybody else is much higher. In Dayton and in Cleveland, it's what I call tax hell. And those people are paying, if we're paying 2 to 2.5% in Southwest Ohio, they pay 2.75 to 3.25% of tax rate in Dayton, in Montgomery County, and in Cuyahoga County, Cleveland. So we're kind of in the middle of the pack right now in terms of taxes. A couple other things on your tax bill. A lot of people think that the county auditor, if he raises people's property values up, it raises tax collections. It sounds like it would make sense, right? The higher the tax valuation, the higher the collection. And of course, what I told you is the taxes collected in any particular year are tax rate times valuation. So if you have more valuation, you need to have more money, right? That's actually largely not correct in Ohio. And the reason is, when you pass a tax levy in Forest Hills, in Cincinnati Public, in Northwest, or anywhere else, when you pass a tax levy, that tax levy, by what they call House Bill 920 in Ohio, that tax levy is at a fixed dollar value throughout the life of the levy. So if it generates $40 million a year in the first year, it's going to generate $40 million a year throughout the life of that levy. Now what that means is, let's say it's a 20-year levy. And if during the life of that levy, valuations, the overall valuations, not your property, but the overall valuations in the district go up, it means the effective tax rate for that levy goes down. So sometimes a levy will be on the ballot and you'll hear them say, we need more money because this levy does not keep up with the rate of inflation. Have you heard that during levy campaigns? That's actually true. In Ohio, because of House Bill 920, if that levy, year one of a 20-year levy, is generating $40 million, at the end of that levy period, with some exceptions, it's basically generating the same amount of money. So what that means is, as your valuations go up, the rate is getting rolled back, and we're going to show you that in real numbers as we go forward. But we have voted in, and our politicians are imposing so many more of taxes that we're getting higher and higher tax bills exceeding the rate of inflation. Now again, I mentioned this before, but essentially what you pay in taxes, and this is a massive simplification. If you knew how complicated it was to calculate exactly how much you owe in taxes, it's mind-boggling. There's a guy down in the auditor's office in each county whose job it is to run these spreadsheets for all the stuff we talked about, and I think somebody up in the Ohio Department of Taxation, to come up with these numbers of what your taxes actually are on your house, and it's very complicated. But in essence, you take your valuation times the effective rate minus rollbacks, and that equals the amount of your taxes. And I'm going to take a minute to go through your packet that I gave you tonight, because there's some materials in here that'll be helpful as we go forward. First of all, there's a copy of the outline that we have, the PowerPoint that we're going through. We're going to get to this in a minute, but you have the board, the complaint for the Board of Revision. Make sure you have that out, and we're going to go through that in detail. For people online, this is going to be linked on our website, and you can also pick it up on your county auditor's website. So that form is what we're going to go through in detail to empower you to fill that out yourself. The next is, I have the Hamilton County instructions here, which will be available online to anybody throughout the state. The rules are the same: how to fill out the form, how to present your case at a Board of Revision hearing, okay? And that's in the packet. And these are just, I think, by and large, printouts from Dusty Rhodes, the Hamilton County Auditor's website. A lot of this will cover what we're going to talk about tonight. Then this chart is what I wanted to get to. This chart is available in each of Ohio's 88 counties every year. And it has the chart of tax rates in every jurisdiction in the county. In this case, Hamilton County, it has 241 different taxing jurisdictions, and those are determined by the school district you're in, the city, village, or township that you're in, and then the fire district, sewer district, and so on. This determines your effective tax rate. If you look at this chart and look all the way on the right-hand side, it has residential, agricultural effective rate, and then commercial industrial effective rate. This gives you that millage calculation district by district. And we're going to show you in a minute on your tax bill, in the second column it says tax district number. If you find that on your tax bill, you can correlate that with this chart each year and see what your effective tax rate is. Now, with a little bit of shameless self-promotion, in the right-hand pocket of your packet is that Supreme Court announcement that I told you about that we're proud of. There's a little bit of announcement about our estate planning practice at our law firm, Wills Trust and Estate Planning, and that team, and then our title company that we started last year as well, and we would love for you all to consider using. And then finally, a little brochure about our tax business, and then a few things about the practice areas of our law firm and what the title company does. Back to the slideshow. I have a friend. He lives 3 doors down from Buskin Bakery on Madison Road, right at Zumstein Avenue in Hyde Park. And Mark Miller is a dear friend of mine, and he allows me to use his house and his tax bill as an example in this class. Okay, so don't worry about being my client that I'm going to use your tax bill in front of everybody, because Mark's given me special permission to do that. This is Mark's house there on Zumstein. He's fixed it up very nice. It used to be a 2-family, and he turned it into a 1-family for his big family he had there. And then what we tried to do with this next 2 slides is to show a tax bill pretty much by component as you receive it. Now, do I have anybody here tonight from Warren County? Because Warren County's is a little bit different. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But this has the basic information that's included on your tax bill. So the question for the starting question for the evening is, if your tax bill has this market value on it, the question is your property worth more, or in this case less, is your property worth less than the county auditor says it's worth? The county auditor's opinion of Mark's property is it's worth $255,000. If it would sell for an amount more than that or equal to that, stop. You don't want to do this process. And by the way, there's several reasons why you don't want to do this process. It takes your time. We're going to talk about getting an appraisal, so you have to pay for an appraisal. But the biggest reason is it's possible for the county auditor to raise your valuation, not just lower it. And while I'm on that point, let me tell you one other story. The county auditor has the ability, if he realizes you put an addition on your house, or in my neighborhood, I had a neighbor who had an $800,000 house, give or take. And the county auditor had never caught the fact that there was a house on that lot. So this guy got a free ride for 5 years of not paying taxes on that lot. And then one day the county auditor found the house. And he has the right under Ohio law to go back 5 years and get what's called an omitted tax. And he collected, so if you say $800,000 times 2.5%, or back then it was about 2%, would be $16,000 a year of taxes. He got to go back, the county auditor went back and got close to $80,000 of taxes in one fell swoop from that property owner who he hadn't charged for his taxes all of those years. So we encourage people to be cautious about this process. It's not something you just go do because, hey, I might get my taxes down. And the other thing, as I said before, don't go into this process assuming that the auditor is not going to find out about your finished basement or the addition you did on your house or whatever it might be. Don't try to pull the wool over their eyes because you can end up with a bad outcome from that. Now, the first thing I talked about was market value, and that's the target number. And then remember, I said they then take that number and multiply it for purposes of the tax world, of tax language, by 35%. And so this $89,000 number, you'll see that number again tonight. The county auditor speaks in that language of 35%, or what they call assessed value. And by the way, this is kind of a funny little sub-story of this class, but the tax bill calls it assessed value. But like trying to assemble a Christmas present from the instructions and you can't find the parts that come with it, when you go to fill out the tax form in question, they don't use that term assessed value. You'll see that this word assessed value that appears on your tax bill is different than the verbiage that they use on the form to complain about it. So then the other thing we're going to use is up in the left-hand corner is book plat and parcel number. That's an important thing as well. Now, on this bottom row of information, there's all kinds of numbers, and you see these things on your tax bill and you say, what is that? You know, it doesn't make any sense to me. You remember I told you that we vote in levies at a certain millage, and then over a period of years those go down because of House Bill 920. And over a long period of time, that's a lot of money. And that's what these first three numbers tell us. The full tax rate in mills is what you voted in originally for the tax rate for your schools and your city and everything else. If the county was taxing you at the full rate that people voted themselves, Mark's house would be 103 mills. But because of the effect of House Bill 920, that has over years been rolled back by 27%, by 0.27. So that third number is the effective tax rate. The effective tax rate then is about 73% of what was voted in, and that's what he actually has to pay, 75.2%. And then that final number is the taxing district, and that number, 001, correlates with this chart that you have. And if you look at that, City of Cincinnati, Cincinnati Public Schools, that's Mark's school district. The next slide, again, this appears on your tax bill. It, like a lot of other things about the tax bill, can be confusing, so I'm going to walk you through it line by line. The first one is gross real estate tax. What is that number? That number is Mark's house value at $255,000 times the full voted tax rate. If it wasn't for the effect of House Bill 920 and the rollbacks and the other credits, Mark's tax bill will be $9,255 per year. Then they take the reduction amount, which is that 73% reduction we talked about at $2,500. The non-business credit and the owner occupancy credit, these are two credits that come to homeowners in Ohio that don't go to commercial properties. The homestead exemption, which I'll talk about when I'm done covering this slide. And then, interestingly, in order to confuse you more, they then divide that number. They take that first number, $9,500, minus those numbers, and then they divide it by 2, but they don't tell you they're doing that, to come up with a half-year tax amount. So that first line is a whole year tax amount. In the middle of those slides, they go down to the half-year tax amount. And then they take off, in Hamilton County only, the stadium sales tax credit. When we passed the stadium sales tax, whenever it was, 12, 14 years ago, they promised us the sales tax credit on your property tax bill for homeowners only, owner-occupied residences, and that's what that is. By the way, that number has come down over the years. It's not the full amount they promised us, but we still get some of it. And then Mark has an assessment. In the city of Cincinnati, there's an assessment for trimming trees. That's the tree assessment of $157. So Mark's half tax bill, and I think that's only on the first half in the January tax bill. It's not on the June, July tax bill. So Mark's taxes are then $3,070.99 per half. Now, I told you I was going to talk to you about the homestead credit. The homestead credit, when I started in practice years ago, was a means-tested credit. Only people with very low incomes would get a credit, and it's a credit on the first $25,000 of value. You don't pay any tax on the first $25,000 of value if you get that credit. And if you assume that 2% rate, $2,500 would be worth $500 a year. It's a nice credit. Then they got rid of the means testing for about 15 years, and everybody got it if you were 65 or older or permanently disabled. Everybody got it. And by the way, it only had to be one spouse or the other, the husband or the wife, either 65 years or older or permanently disabled, got a free $500 a year off their taxes. With Governor Kasich's budget, I think last year, they again means tested that. And you now have to have an income level below $35,000 a year in order to qualify for that. However, anybody who was getting the credit, who got that credit, is grandfathered in, and that grandfathering applies if you even buy a new residence. If you move to a different residence, you still get that credit. So it's complicated, not eligible for most people now, but it is eligible for anybody who was in the program previously. The next slide shows you where those taxes go. What do I need all these taxes for? In Ohio, about 2/3 of your tax bill goes to the school district. Now, you might say, gee, schools spend a lot of money if they're getting 2/3 of the money. But really, the way it works in Ohio is that cities and villages are paid for with your earnings tax. School districts are paid for with the property tax. And county government and state government, by and large, are paid for with your sales tax. So they apply different taxes to different jurisdictions. Now, it's not as clean as what I just said, because the cities get a piece of the property tax and the state gets some of the property tax or the income tax and so on. But that was the general scheme originally. So still to this day, that comes through, and schools are primarily funded with property taxes. And in this case, and for most counties, it's remarkably consistent. The schools, most school districts, the schools get about 2/3 of the tax bill. It might go between 60% and 75%, but in most counties it's right around 2/3 of your total tax bill goes to your school district. So then the question is, where's the rest of it go? The next big slice is your city or township, and then there's a series of small levies. In Hamilton County, mental retardation, mental health, senior services, children's services, zoo, police communications levy, etc. There's like 9 separate property tax levies on your tax bill, and those are those little slices, and that's what Dusty Rhodes refers to, our county auditor refers to as being nibbled to death by ducks. It's a big number in the end, but each one of those levies is fairly insignificant. You'll vote on 1 or 2 or 3 of those in any particular calendar year. Now, of everything that we talked about tonight, so that was kind of the first half of the course to talk about and help you to understand your property tax bill. Now, the second part of the course is to tell you how you can affect the valuation, okay? Which is how you can save money on your taxes. Again, a valuation reduction, if your house is on for $300,000 and you get the value knocked down by $30,000, 10%, you'll save 10% on your tax bill. And putting that in terms of real numbers, if you get your valuation knocked down by $10,000, you're going to save around $200 to $250 for every $10,000 you get knocked off of that tax bill. The savings that you get is at least through the end of the triennial. And what does that mean? Because we don't, like in normal language, use words like triennial and sextennial, right? What does that mean? That's a 3-year period or a 6-year period that they use in the tax world. And every 3 years, the county auditor comes in and does an adjustment of your property. And in every other period of that, every 6 years, he does a major readjustment. So you're going to get a significant change, potential significant change in your valuation based upon a fresh look at your property. And that's what's required by statute. In Hamilton County, Claremont County, and Butler County, that was this year, January of 2015. And in Warren County, it'll be next year. Your January 16 tax bill is next year. Now, 2 other things about confusing you intentionally. The reason I ask if anybody here is from Warren County, in Warren County, they do not put on your tax bill the total valuation. You have no idea what the county auditor thinks your property is worth if you look at your tax bill in Warren County, because the only number they actually show you on your tax bill is the 35% number, the assessed, or what they call the taxable value. So somebody who's got a $255,000 house in Warren County gets their tax bill, and they say, oh, the auditor says it's only worth $89,000. I'm not going to touch that. It's like a good deal to me. But all they're doing is confusing you by not sharing that information with you, because it's the same system in Warren County. They just don't give you that extra piece of information. Now, the other thing that's confusing, and pay attention because it takes a while to think about this. When we are challenging values this year in calendar year 2015, we are challenging the 2014 valuation. Property tax, I'm going to say something that's even more confusing. Property taxes in Ohio are paid 6 months in arrears at the end of the period. What does that mean? We don't talk like in normal language in those terms, right? At the end of the period, the first half of 2014 is January 1st through June the 30th. So the end of the period is June the 30th. It's paid 6 months in arrears. It's paid in January of 15, the first half of 14. In June of 15, you're going to get another tax bill. That is for the second half of 14. And the reason that that's important is that when we appeal your property taxes this year, in calendar year 15, we're really appealing the 14 taxes. And all of your evidence and everything you're going to argue about at the hearing is targeted to one date, a snapshot of what your property was worth. Doesn't matter. Let's say you put a $100,000 addition on your house in February. Doesn't matter. They want to know as a snapshot, what did your property look like on January the 1st, 2014? And anything that happened after that is not relevant for purposes of this proceeding. January the 1st, 2014. When you do the complaint in 2015, you'll have your hearing or determination sometime between June and September of this year. By then you will have paid your second half tax bill, so you'll paid a whole year of taxes. They'll decide what your new valuation is, and based upon that valuation, if you get it reduced, you'll get a refund check. And then when your new tax bill comes out in 2016, January of 16, you should have that lower value on there. And part of the purpose of this slide is to tell you that that savings that we achieve for you, that you achieve for yourself, is guaranteed, with a little asterisk after it, almost guaranteed by law to last for 3 years. And that's important because if you're going to have to hire an appraiser, or even if you have to hire an attorney to do the work, you can calculate, if I'm guaranteed 3 years of savings, is it worth doing this proceeding? And this will tell you that. In Warren County, the new triennial starts next year, but if you win this year, our experience is they'll carry that value over to the new triennial. So as a practical matter, not guaranteed, not as a matter of law, but as a practical matter, you'll actually get 4 years of savings in those counties. Okay? Now, should I appeal? Again, if your assessed value is equal to or less than what you really think your property is worth, don't appeal, because you might end up with an increase or you might end up doing a lot of work for nothing. The point of this process, by the way, then why are we here? Well, the point of the process is, in Hamilton County alone, the county auditor has 360,000 parcels to assess. And if you're going to do 360,000 of anything, unless you're Aaron Denton with Summit Funding and you'll get it right every time, you're going to make some mistakes. And the point of the process is to correct those mistakes. The county auditor misses stuff. And he gets about 5,000 complaints a year. And of those complaints, he actually grants about 80% of them. There's a reduction in about 70 to 80% of those on a typical year. Now, we talked about this already, the first one, which is we're talking about January the 1st, 2014. That's the date that's going to appear on your complaint when we start filling it out. That's the effective date of the challenge. And when you present evidence at the hearing, all of your evidence is targeted to the question, what is my property worth as of January the 1st, 2014? And in fact, if you go to a hearing and you testify, I want you to say those words. I am targeting the value of my property, because they want to hear that. They want to know, did you get it? Because a lot of people come in and say, what's my house worth today? Or what was it worth 2 years ago? They want to know, you want to say, I am targeting the value of my property as of January the 1st, 2014. And then the second date you need to know is an absolute drop-dead date. March 31st of every year is the deadline for filing complaints for property tax valuation. If you miss that deadline, you can't file to the next year. And I always have somebody ask, well, if I win my case, can I get property taxes back for several years? The answer is no. The only thing that's in play is the taxes for that you're paying in this year, which are really your 2014 taxes. Now, let me say one other thing, because I know I got some realtors in the room. The one thing that's important about this triennial process is to understand that the Hamilton County Auditor, the Claremont County Auditor, and the Butler County Auditor in calendar year 14 went through a process of revaluing every parcel in their county. But they stopped collecting data to calculate that information sometime in August of last year. That means that if there was a sale, and they stopped collecting for 3 years, by the way, they will not look at any new data in their county now for 3 years, from August of 14 going forward. And that means that if you have an actual sale of property, so if you buy a property, or for the realtors, any sale that happens in your office, if it's in an amount less than the auditor's value, and if it is an arm's length sale, meaning it's not mother to daughter, it's not a bankruptcy sale, it's not a foreclosure sale, if it's a true arm's length sale, and by the way, one of the reasons that the Board of Revision says by definition it's an arm's length sale is if there's a realtor commission paid. If you have a HUD-1 and it says realtor commission paid, they pretty much will accept that as an arm's length sale, because people don't get realtors involved unless it's an arm's length sale typically. In an arm's length sale, they will accept that value, and that means if you have a sale less than the auditor's value, it is as simple as filling out the form I'm going to show you tonight, sending it with a copy of the closing statement and or the purchase contract, and they will send you a refund check. There's nothing more to do. And for the next 3 years, the county auditor is not going to update that information. So if you have a sale that's below the value, that person's going to continue paying way more in taxes, or maybe somewhat more in taxes, than they need to, unless they fill out that form and send it in. And it is, if you do that, it is largely free money. It's almost guaranteed, almost automatic that that will happen. Now, again, don't let them confuse you. There's different terms for these things. We have the 100% value number, what your property is worth, true value, full value, market value or fair market value, they use those terms. And then for the 35% number, they say it's called assessed value or taxable value. And they talk in this language in the tax world that nobody else. Where will they get 35%? Where does that come from? I have no idea. Now, we're going to go to the form. So in your packet.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir. Yes.
On the fair market value, so not the 35% reduction, do they make that public record how they determine what that fair market value is? I mean, the example you gave, if I purchased a home for $300,000 right now, I could submit that to the county and the county would accept that as a value. When they redo that assessment 3 years from now, do they make that public as to what formula they use to come up with?
Aaron, that's a really good question. So the question is, does the auditor tell you how he came up with your value that he assesses your property with? I think the answer is no. It's not on the website. They have, the Hamilton County Auditor has some sales data, but I don't think the actual calculation of where they came up with your value is there. But here's the important thing in response to your question. It doesn't matter. When you go to a hearing, and I have clients, it's funny, if they go without an attorney, they want to say the auditor was blind or the auditor didn't like me or the auditor's got a bias because he's trying to raise. They don't care. The auditor's motivation, the one thing that is true about this process is the Ohio legislature has given the county auditor the right, the absolute right to assess, to provide the initial valuation of every parcel in the county. You cannot like it, you can question his motives, but the legislature had to choose somebody to do that, and they chose the county auditor to do it. So how he gets to his number is not evidence before the hearing, it's not relevant, and if you want to attack how he does his methodology, you're barking up the wrong tree. What you want to do is just prove your own case. Okay? Now, this first form, we have the form. This is available on our website. It's available on your county auditor's website, and it's there with you in your packets. We're going to show you how to fill this out. The first thing, most important, tax year is not the year you're filling it out. It's the prior year. You're challenging for the prior year. People may be watching this video in a later year, in 16, 17, or 18. Hopefully it'll endure for a long time. But it's always going to be the same. If you're filing in 17, the date you're going to use on the form is 16. If you're filing in 18, the date you're going to use is 17. Then we put the owner's name, their mailing address, which may be different than the subject property address. And if there's an attorney involved in item 3, he would put his name and address. Basically, no one else is going to file that complaint for the owner except an attorney. So if you are a realtor, you're not empowered by law to do that. If it's an accountant or a lender or someone else, or the son-in-law of somebody who's in a nursing home, you probably can't be the agent and file that form. You also want to check the box, original complaint. The next, we're moving down the form. Remember I told you that parcel number would be important, so you're going to put that parcel number in item 6 and the address of the property. Now this is the address of the subject property. Item 7, the use of the property, residential. This is the hardest part of the course. If we get past this, we got it licked, okay? You're going to again put the parcel number. Now let me warn you, if you have multiple parcels, my house, we own our house, we actually own a whole lot next to it on which you could build another house. You probably should not in that circumstance put both parcels on one complaint. What the board wants you to do is if they are a single economic unit. So if you have a hotel and the adjacent parcel is a parking lot and they use the parking lot in conjunction with the hotel, you almost have to put them on the same complaint. But if they're not used in conjunction with one another, you want to keep them separate. So if you have 8 parcels or 10 parcels that are together as a single economic unit, let's say a shopping center, you have to put them all in one complaint. And if there's not enough spaces on the form, you just say, see the attached Exhibit A. The second and third column, it says at the top, complainant's opinion of value. So now you get this as your chance to say, here's what I think my house is worth. So in this case, Mark Miller is going to tell the county auditor, my house is only worth $150,000. And then he does a number that doesn't make isn't relevant to anybody, but it's the language in which the county auditor speaks, 35% number. So he takes that $150,000 number, multiplies it by 35%, and fills in column B. Column C then, remember I told you would see that $89,000 number again? Y'all remember me telling you that? There it is. Okay, so the $89,000 number is from the tax bill. Now, Laura, this is where I want you to go back to that slide, okay? Here it says current taxable value on the form, right? Under column C, current taxable value. You have to go all the way back to the tax bill. Here they call it assessed value. So you're trying your best as a homeowner and you say, I want to fill out this form correctly. They want me to look for taxable value. And you're looking at your tax bill saying, those words don't appear on the form. What could this mean? It means they're trying to confuse you, okay? Now, the bottom of the form is just a series of questions then. The auditor wants some more information. And I'll again tell you, don't fill out this form assuming the auditor's office is stupid, that the Board of Revision doesn't get it, because they have lots of data that you don't know that they have. They have access to MLS. They also get copies of building permit applications for your property that show the valuation of improvements that you put in those. So they say, was the property sold in the last 3 years? Yes, no, or unknown. You probably want to say no. Most of the time you're going to know the yes or no on that. If the property was not sold but was listed for sale the last 3 years, attach a copy of the listing agreement. So one of the things that really gets boards of revision upset is if you say your property's worth $150, but you have it listed for sale for $300. They don't like that a lot, okay? Because they have that. And I've actually been in a board of revision hearing when they pulled it up on the screen and said, oh, you think your property's only worth $100? You've got it listed for $200. Explain that. If any improvements were completed in the last 3 years, show the date and total cost. Do you intend to present the, by the way, these numbers, 3 years and 3 years and 3 years, what does that mean? Is it 3 years from the tax lien date of 1/1/14 or 3 years from March the 10th when you're filling out the form? They don't tell us. We don't know the answer to that. I tend to think it's 3 years from the date you're filling out the form. And then the final question is a little confusing, okay? So remember I told you that if you win your case in 15, that savings will last 3 years. That's part of a rule that says we're only going to have each property heard by the Board of Revision every 3 years. We're not going to let people come in every single year. If you win or lose, you're stuck with that value for 3 years. Item 14 is the exceptions to that rule. And the exceptions are a sale, some kind of casualty to the property, this tree falls on the addition and takes it out, or you add an addition to the property. And then the final one is for commercial property that your valuation, that your occupancy fell by 15% or more. Now I said, look, I've got 3 boys and one of them went off to college. I have a 25% reduction in occupancy. I should be able to bring my complaint again, right? Right, Randy? It would work that way, right? Well, it doesn't work that way. Doesn't work that way. Okay, so it's only for commercial properties. Your kid goes off to college, that's not a 15% reduction in valuation. Then finally you have to sign the complaint, and it must be notarized, and it must be filed with the county auditor's office by the close of business on March 31st. If March 31st falls on a Sunday, which it does not this year, then you have till the 1st. Or the 2nd if it falls on a Saturday. We actually had that one year, to April the 2nd. Now, this was funny. Item number 9, I always have fun with this because this is an actual complaint that a client brought to me. We always tell people, fill out item number 9, just say the auditor's value exceeds market value. Or what I say is, this is not your opportunity to vent your spleen. This is not your opportunity for creative writing, okay? You just want to play it straight. It's worked for me in thousands of complaints that I've filed over the years. Auditor's value exceeds market value. Now, I had a client that came to me back in 2009, 2010 timeframe, and he had already filed his own complaint. And he said, Chris, would you represent me at the hearing? Can you help me out? And I said, sure, I'll be glad to try to win this one for you. So I took it over, and we're doing all of our work. And at some point, we actually read the complaint, and we said, uh-oh, we've got a problem, because here's what he did. For item 8, he said, A, complainant is to provide comparable properties prior to the hearing. B, the auditor is to provide comparable properties used for valuation prior to the hearing. So Aaron, that sort of ties in with your question. How'd the auditor come up with these numbers? The guy's crazy. Then item 9, he said, question 9 is the requested change in value is justified for the following reasons. He says, see the attached historical real estate tax expense percent of gross rental income. He's saying because my taxes have gone up so much, my valuation must be wrong. And then he also says the misrepresentation of the property reevaluation process every 6 years. He's saying the county auditor is a liar. Okay, this is what my client hands me. I'm like, well, okay, this is going to be great. Thank God we go to the hearing and the Board of Revision never read the complaint. They just let us have our hearing and we won. Because if they had read the complaint, they would have thrown us out on our ear. So just play it straight on item 9 and throughout the whole complaint. By the way, when you go in for your hearing, again, it's not spleen venting time. It's actually, I've practiced before well over 30 of Ohio's boards of revision. There's 88 counties. I've probably been in 30 or 40 of them. And this process is one of the most friendly processes available for people without an attorney, just like small claims court, to go in and argue your own case. But it's a good thing you're either watching this video or here tonight, because you need to have your ducks in a row. You need to have the right evidence to present, and you can win your own case. Now, quick question. If I file a complaint with the Board of Revision, do I still need to pay my taxes as billed? The answer is generally a yes. Go ahead and pay your taxes, then file. By the way, if you are delinquent, if you haven't paid your taxes for 2 years, you can still do this process. You can still get your valuation reduced and your taxes reduced. They don't hold it against you. They don't even know in the hearing that you haven't paid your taxes. But you still have to pay the taxes and penalties if you don't. Now, there is a process in Ohio where you can do what they call tender pay with the January tax bill. If you've already filed your complaint before you pay your taxes, there's a form you can fill out with the county treasurer that allows you to pay the amount that you say is due, not the amount that is actually due. But if you lose your hearing, you have to pay the taxes, the interest and penalties on the underpaid amount. So it's your call. Generally, it's not worth doing. I did a tender pay, one tender pay so far this year for a client. Now, at the Board of Revision, I always have people make two mistakes, want to make two mistakes, or in these classes that I teach, two common mistakes about valuation. The first is, do I have any engineers in the room? I'm an engineer. I always love engineers. Okay, I got an engineer in the office that does this, and he's run a reverse calculation analysis of 812 properties in a 12-mile radius of their house and says, my property must be overvalued because of this analysis. Thank you very much, but it's not that complicated and it's not that helpful. I don't mean to take a whack at engineers, but it was always an engineer that comes in my office that's done that. Okay? By the way, the valuation that the county auditor puts on your neighbor's property, it really sticks in people's craw. Say, look, there's 12 houses on my street. They're all the same, but mine's the highest valuation by far of any of them. And therefore, my property must be overvalued. I don't care how much it sticks in your craw, and I don't care how unfair you think it is. It is not relevant. It is the amateur's mistake in a Board of Revision hearing to even make the argument. They don't care. And the reason by law is that some guy's opinion of the value of somebody else's property has no relevance to the question of what's your property worth. And the reason is he could be wrong about everybody else's house in your street, and he could be dead right about your house. So his opinion and he could be wrong about all of them. His opinion of the value of somebody else's property is simply not admissible, and it's not relevant to the proceeding. The other thing that people say, and this was funny, and back in 2009 I had a guy come to me and he said, Chris, I know my property is overvalued because here in the middle of the recession my property value went up 18%. And I know my house value didn't go up 18%. I said, well, what's your house valued for today? He says, $610,000. I said, well, if you went to sell your house, what's it really worth? He says, oh, it's worth way over $800,000. I said, well, then you're still undervalued. Just because you went up 18% means nothing in terms of the question, is my property fairly valued today? The only issue is, what is the property worth as of the tax lien date? A realtor can help you answer that question, and of course today There's more online tools than ever to help you do that, and we're going to talk about how you determine that for purposes of filing the complaint and for purposes of presenting your case to the Board of Revision. For residential property, first of all, if it's new construction, if you've built your own house, how much did you pay for the land? How much did your improvements cost? How much did you pay the builder? Those are relevant pieces of information. For everybody else, sales data, actual sales on your street, in your neighborhood, of comparable properties is the most relevant data. Listing data is of little value. Now, if you think about it, that's inconsistent with what I told you before, which is if you have your house listed for $300,000 and you're seeking a reduction to $150,000, they're going to hold that against you. They will. But on the flip side, if you say, look, my house has been listed for 18 months at $200,000 and it's not selling, but the auditor says it's worth $230,000. It seemed like a pretty easy case to get a reduction, right? But they don't like that kind of data very much. Or if you say my next door neighbor's house, which is identical to mine, has been on the market for 14 months at a number less than the county auditor's number. It's not very probative. I mean, it can be supportive data to your sales data, but it's really not that important to the county auditor or to the Board of Revision. The comparable sales are the best evidence. What is a comparable sale? These next two slides will show you that. On this slide, we have timing, okay? Now I'm going to say two things on timing, 6 months and 18 months. Understand what I'm saying? Because sometimes people confuse it. The best sales are 6 months on either side of the tax lien date. For purposes of a complaint filed this year in 15, what's the tax lien date? We've talked about this. You guys should have this now. January 1st of 14, right. The tax lien date is January 1st of 14, so 6 months on either side of that, which would be June 30th or July 1 of 13 to July 1 of 14. That's 6 months on either side. That's the 6-month date. 18 months. The best data is 6 months, at the very most 18 months. If you have to widen the net to get good information for the Board of Revision, that's fine. So the best is within 6 months. If you have to go 18 months, what's 18 months? 18 months would be July 1st of 12 all the way up to the hearing date, all the way up to the date in 15 in which you have your hearing. That's okay data. I wouldn't go any further than 18 months, but the best data is within 6 months on either side of the tax lien date, and preferably in a location near your property. Now, in my particular, with respect to my particular house, our subdivision has a valuation, within 50% on either side for the houses in my subdivision. If you go to the next subdivision, the houses are across the street from mine. They have a river view. The houses are 2 to 3 times the valuation in my subdivision. So I actually have to go further away, another 3/4 of a mile to a mile away, to get good comps once you leave my own subdivision. So location is not always the factor. Once I had somebody ask me, Chris, can I go to a different county for sales comps? I said, nah, I'd rather you didn't. I'd rather you not go to a different school district. I'd rather you not go to a different county. She says, well, the county line's down the middle of my street, so I can't go across the street. I said, well, if the schools are comparable, if the jurisdiction is otherwise comparable, you can go across the street, but otherwise, we don't want you to, you should, if they are comparable, you should be able to go across a county line or a school district line. Then, size of house and lot, age of the house, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, total square footage, number of garages. These are the kind of things the Board of Revision wants to know. Is it really comparable, or is it something different? By the way, there are people that have very unique properties. I had one that was a Florida-style stucco, like Miami, Florida, in the middle of like Sims Township. Interesting house. Frank Lloyd Wright-style houses. There's one of those right next to my house. They have a smaller market, but the reality is, by and large, at least in my experience at the Board of Revision, those seem like major differences when you look at it, but they really are minor differences when they come to valuation. They want to know number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, age of construction, and most important is location, location, location. This order that I have on this slide, by the way, is kind of an order of importance. So down at the bottom, I have amenities and the interior finish. The Board of Revision really doesn't care about that. So when you show a house, if it's got granite countertops, custom cabinets, the best flooring, a buyer's going to pay a lot more for that house. But the Board of Revision doesn't think that that matters a lot. They really don't care too much about that. The evidence to submit to the Board of Revision. For arm's length sales, we talked about a copy of the purchase contract or a copy of the HUD-1. By the way, for the entire time I've been a real estate attorney, 30 years, we've called it a HUD-1. That's the closing statement. In August of this year, they're requiring, did you know this, Ellie? They're requiring a new form. No more HUD-1. It's gone. Brand new forms, not called a HUD-1 anymore. And it's best if you're going to do your complaint, if you can get your data together before you file it. In some counties, they won't make you come down for a hearing. They look at your form, they say, yeah, we agree with your data, and they'll give it to you. Franklin County, Columbus, has a new procedure where they'll talk to you. They do a mediation over the phone and try to work it out. In Hamilton County, what they do is they call you, or I'm sorry, they send you a letter. They say, we like your data. You probably don't need to come down for the hearing, but they require the hearing. If the Board of Revision disagrees, you don't have to come down. If the Board of Revision disagrees with your information or your complaint number, they'll tell you, we'll give you a second hearing date, you can come down for that one. So they save people a lot of time by doing it that way. For all other properties, it's best to have an appraisal report showing the valuation. Now I get the question, can I use a refinance appraisal? If I've just refinanced my house, Aaron's done the refinancing, can I use that appraisal report to use at the hearing? I say yes, and I've been able to successfully do that, but I've heard people, including Dusty Rhodes at one of my seminars, say no, we don't want refinance appraisals because that's for a different purpose. Usually it's not for the right date and so on. But my thinking is it's about as objective as you're going to get. They don't want to do a high number for the lender, or they don't want to do a low number, for the lender. They want to keep it fair. So I think it's good, and I've successfully used it, but it's dangerous to do that. Who can testify? Under Ohio law, in every trial that you ever have about property valuation where it's important, the courts have said that the owner is always qualified to testify about the value of his own property. The owner is always qualified to testify. So you can go in, if you're the owner, and testify about your opinion of the value of your own property. And then the only other people in my experience who are qualified to do that are a licensed or a certified appraiser in the state of Ohio and a realtor. And candidly, I've had limited success of recent with realtors, or what they call broker opinion of values. If you have a significant savings at issue, you're better off paying for and using an appraiser. No one else by law should be able to testify at a hearing. So if grandma's in a nursing home and son-in-law wants to testify for her, you might get away with it. They might be nice enough to let you do it, but it's, again, risky. They might disqualify that person from testifying. So go save some money and let us know if we can assist you. Okay? Thank you all for your questions and participation. Thank you for your time. Thank you.